Joining us today on Geaux Acadiana is Major Rob Reardon with the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office. And Rob is the Director of Corrections. So we thought we'd talk to him about this whole rigmarole we've heard about sanctuary cities or sanctuary parishes. In our case, we've seen reports that say Lafayette is such an area. And Rob, I guess we should start by talking about the whole booking process. If anybody gets caught, let's say, in a speeding violation or something like that, do they automatically get brought to jail?
Well, for a speeding violation, not necessarily. And ultimately, it's really up to the discretion of the police officer. And so what we actually accept in the jail is misdemeanor and felony arrests. Mm-hmm. And so anybody that's arrested for disturbing the peace, trespass, misdemeanor theft, shoplifting, the police officer has the discretion to either write a summons or bring them to jail. Now, for example, if they are arrested for no seatbelt or not stopping at a stop sign, we don't take traffic offenses.
All right. So
go ahead.
Well, I saw something in this press release about regarding non-booking of a person arrested under Louisiana Statute LRS 14100-13 makes it a felony for alien students and non-resident aliens to drive while not having documentation. And, you know, that part right there gets kind of scary for most people. But booking a person under the statute was found to be unconstitutional by the Court of Appeals. So as a result of the court's ruling, you don't book persons booked under that statute, but you can book them for other things, correct?
Yes. Yes, as long as it's a valid Louisiana state statute and or city ordinance, we book everybody that is brought to our facility. But again, that's really up to the discretion of the police officers. They have that authority in those instances to actually write a summons. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about there is driving with an unlawful presence, I think, was the actual statute. Mm-hmm. And that was found to be unconstitutional back in 2013 by the Louisiana State Supreme Court.
Okay, now the Federal Secure Communities Program began in 2008 and ended in 2014. That allowed ICE or immigration to request that local police keep persons in custody for a period of 48 hours who may also be suspected of being in the country without proper documentation. But after 2014, that stopped, correct?
Yes. And they, from that standpoint, and there was also a couple of case laws that came out in the third district and the Ninth Circuit of Appeals that found that offense or that placement of individuals or detainment of those individuals was actually found to be unconstitutional also. Hmm. And so in 2014, they started the PEP program, which basically requests agencies to cooperate with ICE by allowing them to come in their facility, by notifying them of when we believe that somebody is an immigrant. And we actually follow through on that. Mm-hmm. Now, the portion that we don't do is there's a voluntary request that creates a situation where an individual, once their sentence is completed or their bail is arranged, would detain the person up to an additional 48 hours. But ultimately, in those instances, if that person is not an illegal alien or an immigrant, the sheriff's office would actually be on the hook for limiting their civil rights. Mm-hmm. And so we passed that on to our legal people, and they said that we shouldn't probably do that.
Okay, so if a person is in the country illegally and they get arrested for something, how does that proceed differently than somebody who might have some minor offense? Let's say somebody does create a situation where they shoot somebody and they're brought to jail. Does ICE still get notified? Do you guys have to keep them until ICE picks them up? And if ICE doesn't pick them up, what do you do with them?
Well, great question, Ken. And what we do, and so, like, for example, that specific scenario, they would have to actually go through our criminal process, and they would go through the district court process. They would get charged, I'm assuming. They would be found guilty of that offense. And then at the time that they're completed with their sentence, and this is what we do now, we notify ICE that, this person is coming up on the close of their sentence, say, like, for example, Friday, and we arrange for them to be picked up by ICE on that day that their sentence is completed.
Okay, so if ICE decides not to pick them up, they just get released?
Yeah, at that point, they get released.
That's what that really disturbs a lot of people. It's like if ICE doesn't pick them up, well, I'm sure ICE has got so many cases on hand right now. It may be difficult for them to get to everyone within that 2-day period. And if you happen to keep them longer than 2 days, there will probably be legal ramifications, much less cost implications, correct?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. And, you guys, the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office, you say you're fully compliant with the program except for the blanket acceptance of 48-hour voluntary hold requests due to those liability issues. And I think voluntary hold request is another thing that needs to be defined, I think, for people to understand what the heck's going on.
Exactly, and if and they have the option too. ICE does, and we would honor this if it were actually signed by a judge, either a federal judge or a district judge. We would honor it. But the issue is that you're subjecting them then to detention without probable cause.
Right.
And that's what creates liability for us in our agency.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I saw the report saying that Lafayette Parish was a sanctuary area, I thought this is unreal, because I know the courts were involved, and you and the sheriff's office are doing your part of the job, and I think ICE is doing their part of the job. But sometimes it may just get down to the judicial end of it not being kept up. Correct?
Well, I think there's a possibility of that, and then I also think we've done a little bit of research, and we're doing a little bit more, but even prior to when we were accepting the authority, the voluntary request in 2014 under the old SEC program, the last month that we actually had that system, or we completed that system, we only had 2 people that we actually released to ICE.
So just
now, the month after we stopped taking that authority, we actually released 3 to ICE. And so, I know that it's a concern to people, but the volume of individuals that are being deported out of Lafayette, Louisiana, there's really no evidence to demonstrate that it's a huge, significant amount.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you mentioned the small number, but some people may wonder about somebody who let's say commits a very heinous felony, rape and murder, something like that. Mm-hmm. Let's say they go through the court system, but they get bail and they just skip bail. How does that affect the community? I mean, do you guys, put out an all points bulletin or something, try to recapture these people and get them sent back to wherever they're from?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those individuals would receive a warrant, and we would go out and try and search those people out. You bring up the bail issue. Individuals would end up having the opportunity for bail, but then once they're actually set up for immigration services, and I don't know that people understand this very well either, but because it is super complicated. But if they're brought from our facility by ICE to a federal facility, they then also have the opportunity to bail out through the federal court system. And from my understanding, with talking to the ICE representative, the court system for that lasts anywhere between 6 months and 2 years.
Wow. Before
they would potentially have their day in court and then potentially be deported.
Wow. So many cases here of people being deported 5 or 6 times, and they come back and they come back and they come back, and then they finally wind up committing a crime. And I know we can't talk about specific crimes, but like the crime in San Francisco, where a guy who'd been deported 5 times accidentally shot a woman and killed her. He says he found a gun under a park bench, picked it up, it accidentally went off. And I'm totally crazy about that, because guns don't go off accidentally. There's got to be some irresponsible act, much less if this guy would not have been in the country. And, just so many different things into this. So whenever you mention, sanctuaries, a lot of people, I think, reference that particular crime. And we haven't had that sort of instance here in Lafayette Parish.
Yeah, I think actually there's a news article out on San Francisco today about where they're specifically not working with ICE. However, we are working with ICE. They are in our facility almost every day. We notify them if we believe that there's an individual that is an illegal immigrant, and we do actually coordinate their transfer if ICE wants them. But I've been to several agencies across the country that don't allow ICE into the facility. And so, I guess the concept of us being a sanctuary city is completely inaccurate. We are working with ICE. It's the liability issue relative to the 48-hour hold. There's case law out there relative to that, and we would ultimately lose. We would lose, and that would end up costing the taxpayer more money if we actually complied with that voluntary request.
Mm-hmm. Well, Major Rob Reardon's been our guest from Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office. He's the Director of Corrections. And thanks, Rob, for clearing up a little bit of this, because I know some people are very confused. And when they heard Lafayette was a sanctuary area, they just freaked out. It's good to know we're not.
Yes, we are not. There's no designation by the federal government of any agency being a sanctuary city, and we are working with ICE. So I thank you for the time, Ken.